The 15th film in my 31 Horrors of Mike is Monster Squad, which was released in 1987. It's a film which often gets lost amongst similarly themed movies about kids going off in grand adventures like Goonies and Stand By Me and Lost Boys and even a film like E.T. But it's still one of my favourites of that sort of 1980s genre or subgenre, which I think Spielberg really was the originator of. It follows Monster Squad follows a group of pre-teens and teenagers who form this treehouse club where they all have a fascination with the classic mythology surrounding the monster villains, mostly of the Universal era, and they all have to have a sort of knowledge of it. The leader of this group finds a diary, and the diary is written by Van Helsing, Dracula's famous nemesis. And in the diary he realises that it's German, he can't read it, so he goes to a local old man who he knows comes from Germany, and they translate the diary together, and they discover that there is an amulet which is this thing which is for like the force of good, and at a certain point every 100 years or so the amulet becomes vulnerable, and it must be protected during this vulnerable time, and the Monster Squad sets out to find the amulet. At the same time, the forces of darkness have combined, where you've got Dracula, you've got basically the creature from the Black Lagoon, you've got the Wolfman, and you've got Frankenstein's monster, and they've all been brought together under Dracula's rule. You've also got the Mummy as well, and so it's all your classic Universal monsters, and they are trying to get hold of this amulet, and the only thing that stands in their way is the Monster Squad. And if the Monster Squad don't succeed in protecting the amulet, then the balance between good and evil will be lost, and evil will rule. So that's kind of the idea of it. It's a bit schlocky in places, but that's part of the charm of it, it's part of the fun. There's some really funny lines in this. There's great chemistry amongst the sort of kid actors. Unfortunately, a lot of them we haven't seen in other things since, which I think is a little bit of a shame. But they really were in this great little film. It's directed by Fred Dekker, who also directed Night of the Creeps, which is a much loved B movie from the 1980s. It's a film which I really admire as well. I think unfortunately for Fred Dekker, as his career went off the rails because he directed RoboCop 3. The less we talk about that, the better. But certainly with Night of the Creeps and Monster Squad, he's made two of probably the most iconic feel-good teenage horror movies from the 1980s. I think there's more to Monster Squad sometimes meets the eye. There's a famous line in the film which is to do with the old German man that I spoke of, talking about how he has previous experience with monsters, and you realise that he's alluding to the concentration camps in Germany during the Second World War. So there is more than meets the eye, and you wonder if maybe that was explored more in other drafts. But when the old man is sort of standing up to these forces of evil, there's kind of like there's that backstory, that it's not really fully explored, but you are kind of like, this is a guy who survived the Holocaust, and you'll be damned if another evil person comes along, and you kind of you enjoy that, you're kind of rooting for him and all that. But what I really like is Stan Winston did the creature designs, and although like they are like for example, the creature from the Black Lagoon is called Gillman, but it's the creature from Black Lagoon. But the redesigns are really good. Jonathan Gries plays the Wolfman in human form, which is quite interesting because he always puts a sort of sympathetic spin on it, and he's played almost the same character in Fright Night Part 2. He plays kind of like a werewolf, almost vampire type thing, but it's a very sort of similar character. There's a great showdown at the end of the film. It's one of these things again. It takes place in this sort of small town in America, where good and evil must do battle. And the film interestingly opens as a period piece. It opens up, 100 years previous, when Van Helsing is going toe to toe with Dracula, which is interesting as well. As a kid growing up in the 1980s, as someone who loved horror films and thought about all of these wonderful horrific characters from horror literature and from cinema, it was great seeing a film about a group of kids who were going off to fight these evil creatures. So it's one that I don't think it's as well made as films like The Goonies or especially Stand By Me and even The Lost Boys probably, but it's still a great little film. It's still really enjoyable, and it tends to get forgotten alongside Explorers. It gets forgotten as well in terms of these sort of teen adventure movies from the 1980s. Absolutely worth watching. Go check it out, and go and check out Night of the Creeps as well, Fred Decker's previous film, because that's a great little film as well. So that's the 15th film in my 31 Horrors of Mike, and I'll be back soon with the 16th film in my list. Bye for now.